All right, brother.
Okay.
So today I had a couple questions. The main one, actually one question.
Yeah.
Control what you can control. When we talk about problems or whatever that situations come about, right? There's things that we cannot control. There's things out of our control.
A lot of things you can't control.
Yeah. So I want to pick your brain on that idea, controlling what you can control.
Yeah. So that's something that I actually personally struggled with heavily, where when something went wrong, I wasn't able to adapt quick because I was so caught up on trying to control something that I had no control over. And oftentimes it stunted my progress, it stunted growth, it stunted a lot of the things where basically what you said is as accurate as it's going to get. Are there things in your life where you can't control, right? For instance, downfalls or unforeseen tragedy like deaths or whatever the case is.
Upsets,
Right?
anything.
And there's a lot of things that life's going to throw at you, right? And I come from a standpoint of like taking accountability of everything, right? Whether something's good or bad, whatever happens, it is your fault. So if, let's just say that we'll use this as an example, financial illiteracy, like you don't know how to control finances, right? That is something you can control, right? So if you're in a bad financial position because you make $4,000 a month, but you spend $5,000 a month continuously, that's not something that you can blame and point fingers on. You can point the finger at yourself and understand that is something you could have controlled.
Yeah.
So if you're in a bad position, it's not because of the economy. It's not because of whatever. It's because of the way you spent your money, right? But there are also things like, okay, well, I saved $10,000 and all of a sudden I have to
spend it on an emergency.
Yeah, something came up.
Yeah.
Right. And so I actually have a mentor who was explaining to me that when he was on this process of growing and becoming the wealthy individual he is, he said that in the very beginning it would be like, well, I just saved $3,000, and now he feels like he could breathe, right? He's not struggled. Like again, it started to grow, and then boom, car broke, change a radiator, change something where it basically he felt like, well, I just saved all this to give it back up. I would save it to give it back up, and so on. If he dwelled over like that kind of stuff, I don't think he would have grew, and I know he wouldn't have grown. But he took it from the standpoint of, well, there are certain things that I can control. So in this, from a financial aspect, he controlled the excess spending. He controlled the going out, and I turned this into 100%. A financial point of view. But this applies to anything, right?
Yeah.
So, in essence, if you get caught up on things where you can't, that's life. And something that you said, it stuck with me. Life's fair because it's unfair for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Crazy.
And so when you start to develop a mentality of focusing on what you can control, you get a better outcome, right? And so even in my line of work where let's just say like we have a salesperson who try to sell this job as perfectly as possible, meaning they provided the best service he could. He provided the best communication and so on. But there are, let's just say, because this has happened, we had a truck breakdown, right? Could he control that? No, but he was able to control what he could, which was communicating it so well to the customer that it wasn't a problem. And I'm using, obviously, a truck breaking down is one of them, but it's like where you have, hey, we accidentally broke, like, and again, we're in the line of construction where sometimes working on a job site, you can accidentally step on a sprinkler head or step on something and break, right? And at that point, if something happens out of your control, what can you do to fix it? Well, hey, this is what I can do. So focusing on what you can control, whatever the circumstance, whether it was a bad situation or something bad that happened, if you can focus on the positive of it, of, okay, well, how do I turn this around? You get a better outcome. You get less anxiety. You get less stress, less anything where your mind starts to travel in like, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And that's really what it comes down to for me is in the very beginning, I talked about how I struggled with it personally. Whenever something bad happened, I was so stuck on, like, what do I do? And then, like, how did that happen to me? How did this happen? And so on. And I fixated on the negative, right? Which is, again, what you can't control. I don't want to say for the most part, but whatever the
situation
was. But if you can, I think a different word for it is like a positive attitude. It almost correlates of like controlling what you can control is having a positive attitude.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And so whatever, like, even when you hear me talk about it right now, are there things that, like, we lost money? Lots of it, we lost money. And if I fixated on that, I would have drowned myself in stress.
Yeah, go crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
But we shifted to, well, I can control what we do with this next round of funds that come in, or whatever the case is, to recover this. Because at that point, like, the scenario I'm talking about wasn't our fault, right? It was a fire.
Yeah.
I can't control it. And I could have just sat there and talked. So for context, we put in $40-something thousand worth of this job, right? Didn't get paid. Fire came, which happened early January. The fires in LA burned this project down to the ground. And we lost that. Didn't get paid for it. All the labor went out. All the materials was paid. Everything was paid. Lost it. And at that point, it was our first time enduring, like, even experiencing a fire burning a project down. I was like, okay, well, what the hell do I do? And there were points early on with that happening. I was like, okay, we have to find a way to get it back. And the lender telling me, like, yo, you have to tell the homeowner to go to pay or to use their insurance. And I'm like, I'm not going to kick somebody when the homeowner lost the home, like, his house.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go ask him for anything else. Like, and at that point, it's like, okay, well, that didn't work. And so my mind worked in, what can we do to try to fix or alleviate it? Well, how can I control it? Because I couldn't control it. That's, like, even in insurance terms, that's an act of God. I can't control that. But how I go about operating, I can control.
It's like a troubleshoot.
Yeah, exactly.
You troubleshooted the situation.
Yeah, exactly. And so really, that's where I think my mind shifted to. But if this happened 5-6 years ago, bro, like,
different story.
Yeah, because not these guys know, but if I know me 6 years ago, 7, like, give or take, if something bad happened, I would have, like, I don't want to say
lost, like, your
like,
marbles.
Yeah, I would have just been in the dumps. Like, oh my gosh, sat in the house. Like, that happened to me. I got in trouble serving in the Marine Corps. Was it my fault? I'm going to take accountability of it. Yes. Right. And what I did post getting in trouble, I just sat in my room. I like pouted about it to myself. And I just went down this rabbit hole of this is why I don't like XYZ or whatever the case is.
You start putting, like, thoughts in your mind.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
And again, it happened. What already happened, I can't control it anymore. Right. So it took me some time. It took me like 4 months. And I've told you stories where it took me like 4 months to decide, like, you know what, I'm going to turn it back around, and so on and so forth. Had I had a better thought process, or, the thought process of I'm going to control what I can, it wouldn't have taken me 4 months to bounce back. It would have taken me 10 seconds to be like, oh, crap, that sucks. Let's fix it now. Right? And being able to like leverage the thought process of controlling what you can will allow you to, one, adapt and make progress quicker, because now you're not sitting and dwelling about, this happened, that happened. It's a quick, like, I got punched in the face. I can't control that, but what I'm about to do next, I can.
You about to swing back.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's okay. But what ends up happening to me, for instance, use me as an example, I would get punched in the face and be like, damn, that hurt. And I would think about it for 4 months. Like, that really hurt. That really hurt.
Yeah.
Whereas now I have the skill set of, like, and it was a skill set that I developed. It wasn't a skill set that I was born with, or the mentality that I was born with. I get punched in the face, and now I'm like, okay, where do I go now?
Is there such thing as over controlling situations?
In what sense? Yeah, like you can be an over controlling parent, you can be an over controlling, right? But in what sense are you talking about?
I mean, life, sometimes like if we're in the topic of problems and controlling how you handle problems, can you over control a situation?
I think so. I believe that. I think if sometimes you got to just you're giving it all you got, and I can praise or give kudos to. I think what sometimes people think in terms of over controlling is like it can be confused with I gave it everything I got over and over. So you can argue over controlling is not giving up.
Wow.
Like I failed and I failed, and that in your mind it's like, well, I'm going to control the situation, so no matter what, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. Right? So if you look at it in there's two different points of view where there's a negative connotation and a positive one.
Yeah.
Right? And I think situation will dictate whether it's over controlling, and that word is obviously in a negative connotation, right?
And honestly, I thought of it negatively, but you're talking about it in almost a positive landscape where you can continue pushing the needle and like trying to figure it out rather than just giving up.
Right.
You know?
And so it's up to you to decide like where do you draw that line of whether it's negative or positive, right? And I try to see the positive in most, right? But this is the way I see it, right? Like if you're a parent and your kid's going down a path that you don't want your kid going down, whether it's drugs or fighting or, gangs or whatever it is, right? At what point as a parent are you like, okay, let it go? That parent, I'm assuming, is trying to control that to the best of his or her ability so they don't go down that path. And can you call that over controlling? I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a hard perspective to look at
like
life.
My brother is a great example, and one of these days he'll talk about it. But like, there was a point where my brother, wasn't the model student or the model citizen. He was getting in trouble, and again, I talk about this not to talk down on him, but because he knows it, right?
And he overcame it.
He talks about it where it's like, well, he was not going down the right path. Are there times where I was like, you know what, I can't, like me being I was 18 or whatever years old, where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take matters into my own hand, and I started trying to lecture him. Like I was getting physical with him, like, yo, what the hell are you doing, and so on and so forth. Had I have kept doing that over and over and over, the negative part of over controlling, he would have hated me. And I know to a certain point he did not like me. But again, this is kind of what sucks, but like the situation you're in will dictate whether it's over controlling or not, right? But to any I guess part of it, like you have to figure that part out of because sometimes I also think about it in this point of view, right? When I know I'm putting in all my effort into making this grow or keeping this flowing and so on, and then I tell you stories of, well, this happened and that happened and this happened, like some of those stuff I could have controlled, like wiring money that I could have not done it, but I did it. But along that process there was, okay, well, the banks aren't paying, well, they're not paying, this person's not paying, and all of that added up. And being a Christian at that point, it's like, okay, well, you know what, I'm gonna let God handle it. Is kind of the way I survived.
And that's one of the best things you can do at times.
Yeah. Right. And so I think with that mind, again, everyone listening may not be Christian, and again, to each their own. But my thing was, even from the parent point of view, where your kid's going down the wrong path, you can do everything you can, and to a certain point, it's like, okay, it's difficult because I feel like I'm not a parent, but I have a feeling just seeing my brother, I'm like, dude, I don't want to let it go that way. And a lot of the times where you just let go and just focus on what you can control, it works out.
There's a saying that says let go and let God.
Yeah.
Right?
I've seen that. Yeah.
I mean, I think the universe, life, whatever you believe in, has a funny way to work things out at times.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we overstress in the moment without fully seeing all the possibilities. Like you talk about almost like playing chess with life, where you make a move, but you're also thinking that the next 3-4 moves down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And in the moments of chaos, or in the moments of, you know, the you hit the wall, it's like, what do I do?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And so
tough.
I want to say this. There's a lot of times I see that quote and I see laziness. I see this like, you know, like, you know, I'm living my life because God's taking care of it. And do I agree with it? 100%. But what you talked about, like me talking about, or the way that I think is just like that. Like I explained it where like my mind works like a chess game where if I make this move, what are the outcomes? And then so on and so forth between the different moves that I make. There's a certain point where I used to do that, where I drove myself crazy, where I couldn't make decisions, right? Like if I did this, then this is going to happen. So maybe that's not it. So I still do it because that's just how I am. But there comes a point where I'm like, whatever happens, it's going to work for me. And that's kind of what I just posted. Like, I believe the world's rigged in my favor.
And I love that optimism, you know? Thoughts are powerful.
Yeah. And it took a lot of years to develop that because I was the other end of the spectrum where I appeared positive, where I talked positive. Inside, I had just terrible thoughts like, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And that really stunted growth. And then when I started to think about, well, I can control this. If this happens, this is what I can control. Help me grow. Even amongst failures or losses, being able to shift my focus on what I was able to control helped me, or I guess, project where I'm going towards next.
I think a big point in controlling what you can't control is the emotional aspect of anything, right? I think the biggest thing that stunts us is the emotional side of things rather than the logical, because we start thinking emotionally rather than logically.
Right.
And what do you think about that, like emotions and how they play a role in controlling the aspects around you?
So I think in terms of high emotion, which can be both extreme happiness or extreme sadness or doubt or whatever, positive extreme, negative extreme, right? Playing your emotion, I believe, helps from a positive point of view. Like when something goes well, I will pump that so hard. Like I will take the leverage that I got in achieving something where my emotions in terms of from a positive standpoint are heightened. Now I'm going to take that energy, which is an emotion that I'm going to apply to anything I do, like whether it's the gym or work or whatever it is. I'm like, dude, we're pumping, and you leverage that, right? From the negative point of view, you got to cut it, right? And I say this, you think you know somebody until they're in financial struggle or they're in a position of like backs against the wall or whatever the case is, and that's when a true I believe, right? Because if I meet someone for the first time, of course they're gonna shake my hand, happy. It's, you know, we're at a nice dinner, they're happy, and then you see that same person going through some financial distress, and now they're like backstabbing people, doing things that they shouldn't. Like all that stuff comes into play, right? And so for me, what I try to do within my control is I try not to put myself in a position where, because I've had those thoughts of like hitting that, well, I have nowhere, I feel like it's like rock bottom, and do I have to do this to make money, or do I have to do this to survive, right? And then the thought process that I had was like, I know I don't want to backstab anybody. I don't want to. That's what the point I made is. Everyone here, regardless of how hard it's been for the company, has been paid. I don't have debt to nobody. Like, I'd never backstab nobody. I didn't step on anybody's toes to get here. Is a conscience that I'm proud of, right? And so when you think about it from the standpoint of like, I guess what I do is I operate my life in where I try not to put myself in the position, because maybe you felt it where you were in a bad position and you have bad thoughts. That's why I'm saying cut it.
Yeah, I bet a lot of us have been there, you know?
And some of you may be in that position right now where you feel like you don't know what to do, and it's like the last resort. Last resort, I'm gonna go do something that you probably shouldn't be doing, or whatever the case is, right? And I had this conversation where they said that oftentimes, I don't know the statistic, but it was basically what the conversation was is like the majority of people that commit suicide, they don't plan it in terms of like, tomorrow I'm going to do XYZ. It happens within 20 minutes of they think they can't handle it anymore. Right? And again, super negative. If you can just cut it, and I know it's easier said than done. If you're fighting that fight, keep fighting, right?
Fight.
Right? But you're when you're in that position where it's completely you're super down low, right? Yeah. Where you think you can't handle it anymore. What that is like you're trying to turn a temporary situation into permanent.
Wow.
Which is what happens like with even in arguments. You may be so mad at somebody that you say shit you shouldn't have said, and you ruined that relationship or whatever that is because you said something under some level of distress. Right? That's why I'm saying learn to cut it. But from the positive standpoint, learn to leverage it.
I had written down some, I don't know why, the other day. I had just a crazy thought come to my head while I was just right here, just in the office. Wherever there is suffering, there is room for joy.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know where that idea came from or what that concept in my mind came from, but a coin has two sides.
Yeah.
We just got to flip it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes into the, like, I don't study yin and yang or whatever, light and dark, but I do know, like, when you're going through something bad, there's always something good. In the same token, if you're going through something good, there's going to be something bad. And I've experienced it enough where as a young kid, I'm like, once I have this, like, life's going to be so good. When I got that and then bad happened, I was like, what the hell? This is not what I expected. And then it kept happening, and I realized, like, the whole term, like, save for a rainy day, or you know, like, you're not on top of the world. Like, that's why we have a core value of humility, because no matter how good it gets, it can always still suck. And you can always lose it, or whatever the case is. And if you're in that position of it sucks right now, you can always get it, right? And that's really what it is. And I think when you talk about from the standpoint of, like, suffering and joy and so on, like, you're gonna have both, right? And it's up to you to determine during the times when you are suffering, let's control what we can, right? And then the same thing where I know, well, life's good. Like, I've had a blessed life for as long as I've worked. But do I know that there's negatives in that process? I do, which is why I also control what I can. I try not to over leverage what I have. I try not to spend more than I need to. There's a lot of things that I do think to prevent something. I want to control something bad happening. I'm going to try to control that to the best of my ability. What I can control. You get me? Like fraud, when fraud happens, can I control that? Hell no. I've been frauded. You get me? Which maybe you have. But at that point, you can sit there and stress about what happened, or you can try to come to a solution.
Man, I think that was such a powerful conversation. That was deep quick. It got deep quick. And I mean, that's really what it comes down to. That's the reality of life, is that there's light and then there's dark, you know, just like the day, the sun, the night, the moon, you know. I think everything has a time, and there's going to be times for everything.
Right.
And that's the reality of the human experience, is that we're going to have good and bad. It's just how we start handling the bad.
It is. And I think the more you realize, or the more you are cautious or conscious about, like, there are certain things you really in life that you're never going to be able to control. And as a perfectionist, that's me. Like, I want things done perfectly. And I've learned to realize that, and I've said this before, perfection isn't the result, it's the intention. And that's really what got me back of, like, okay, I I don't want to say ease up. Maybe ease up's not the right word, but I do know, like, okay, well, here, let's let it flow. Let's let it go, because I can't control it anymore. And now the perfectionist inside me is like, okay, well, now I know it was my intention behind it. I wanted to give it everything I got to make it as perfect as I could, but the intention was there, right? And that's what it comes down to from from the point of view of what you can or can't control. That's what it is.
That's what a way, what a thing, what a way to think, bro.
Yeah.
It's a deep conversation, and it's not always easy, but we have the power.
You do.
The strength is within us.
Yeah, and you have to understand, like, there are people that are doing it who may be in similar backgrounds or upbringings as you, right? But the reality is like, can you control that you were brought up in a poor family? No. Right? You can sit there and dwell on it, but you can also sit there and, hey, you know what? This is what I can do to make my life better. Two different ways of thinking on the same scenario, same situation, or the same circumstance, right? Because they'll, like, you hear these things of, like, when you grow up poor, that's more leverage for you, right? And have you ever heard that?
Honestly, no, never.
No? So I believe it. This is why I believe, like, if you look up the statistic of, like, success versus the correlation between success and immigrants, super high. Let me check, right? I'll show you right now. Immigrant generally shows high rates of entrepreneurial activity and economic contributions to the U.S., right? And whatever the statistic actually is, right? It's showing right here that the reason why I believed it, and I felt it even growing up, is because as an immigrant I didn't have the luxuries of, like, you know how little kids in school get lunch vouchers, and it's for the students that didn't have a lot of money, or the families that didn't have a lot of money, or whatever. I don't know the actual.
It's like it's based off income,
right?
Income. Yeah.
I didn't qualify. I know for sure we didn't qualify, but I was like, where the hell do I get those? Because I really want a lunch ticket, and I thought it was so cool that kids had lunch tickets, and my mom was giving me $1 a day to figure it out, right? Because that's when the lunches were.
I remember my dad would give me like 40. I think it was like 40 cents to $1.
Yeah,
give
exactly.
or take. And I think the $1 was one for nutrition and one for lunch.
Yeah, and so for me, where I saw it was like, well, I grew up with not a lot, so I want more for myself. That's why that success rate is correlated, because you don't have a lot and you want it. But the same person with a negative attitude could be like, damn, life dealt me a crappy hand. And they're not thinking about what they can control. Yeah. They're thinking about, like, why did I have to be born in this family, or why did I have to not? I wish I had a life that my friend had, and so on. Yeah. So it's really the conversation we're having is really just the idea of, like, how do you think, positive or negative? That's ultimately what this conversation is about. Is when crap happens to you, do you dwell on the negative, or do you try to find a positive in it?
Perspective.
It's perspective.
Yeah.
Because at the time, I'm like, I think about it now, where I envied low income based off of the meal ticket, and I thought it was so cool. Like, it's a calendar. There's light ones and dark ones, and I wanted that so bad.
Yeah, LAUSD kids would know.
Yeah, you'll know. But in my head, I'm like, dude, that's what I want. And maybe they're privileged, so they have this, and they get, like, the school's taking care of them and so on. And then it hit me where I'm like, knowing what I know now, I'm like, damn, that's how little I had to envy that. And so my life became, well, how do I build my life to have what I want in life?
Beautiful, bro.
Yeah.
I don't think we could have said it any better.
It's perspective.
Perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective's important in anything.
Yeah. So just at the end of the day, this is how we'll end it. Like, just make sure where your focus is. That's what this conversation is. You want to focus on what the positives, which is what you can control, not the negative. There's a lot of crap in life you're never going to be able to control, no matter how hard you try, right? But if you can shift your focus, this is the same thing as a form of manifestation. If you shift your focus on the positives, you attract the positive. And that's kind of how I've learned that in my life. I've experienced that in my life, and I've actually experienced both sides of it, And so now I'm telling you what I have in my life right now and how I think. It's because of where I focus my energy, my thoughts. That's it.
Well, I think there's a saying where where focus goes, energy flows.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Honestly, energy is like the biggest form of currency, I feel.
Yeah, you're right. I was just gonna say that.
And that's what it is. Like there are times where you're drawn, or you might, if you're a gym goer, this is the best gym ever. Like it let me get the best workouts. I used to think about that about Gold's Venice. I didn't go there a lot, but every time I went, because of what the energy was like, I had the best workouts ever. Right? Energy.
I thought the same about barbell.
Yeah,
Barbell
exactly.
Brigade.
And it's the same thing. It's like if you're around negative energy, negative attitudes, or people who always seem to find themselves as the victim in every story, well, you're probably victim number 2 now.
Be careful.
Yeah.
We got to be careful about those things.
So we tied it into a bunch of things, but at the end of the day, it is perspective. That's, I think, really what life is. And the better you get about being conscious about it, you start to put yourself in those positions.
We'll end it with this idea. You know, as a photographer, you have a camera. You have one viewfinder to see what you're gonna shoot. But you gotta just switch the lens, and by switching the lens, you switch the type of shot. It's like changing your perspective.
Yeah.
You know?
Or even focus.
Focus too.
Yeah. See, I'm not a photographer, but I do know if you tap the iPhone and click something else, it focuses on something else.
Yeah.
In one sight.
And that's what we gotta do with our life.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. Thank you, bro.
Yes, sir.
Another day.
Yes, sir. Another day in Woodland Hills.
Another day in Woodland Hills. This was Leverage with Alex Lee.
Let's get it.
Thank you.